So we are on to waste management or resource recovery, this portion of the food system. And generally, I think when we think about waste management, things like that, we're thinking in terms of recycling and packaging and um, garbage, right? Which is certainly a big component of this. At this point, the packaging of organic foods resembles chemically grown foods and might create just as many environmental problems. So, we may have heard about huge amounts of plastic in our oceans. Clearly, some of that comes from things like organic bagged spring mix or lettuces, things like that. So, certainly our packaging, anytime we're processing foods, whether that's organic or chemically grown, we are putting them into some kind of packaging and then disposing of those kinds of packaging. And when we come to rely more and more on processed foods, whether that is from fast food places, whether that is from processed foods in our supermarkets, whatever, there's going to be packaging and waste to be dealt with. Things like to-go utensils and boxes from restaurants. And I think we've seen some strides in dealing with some of those problems, particularly here on the West Coast. Some municipalities have banned giving out plastic bags or charging for bags and encouraging customers to bring their own. Many restaurants use compostable both to-go boxes and silverware, things that are made out of corn or soy. And again, it's kind of a complex issue because it's not necessarily addressing the entire problem. How long do these things really take to compost? Do they actually end up in a compost, or are they going into landfill? Maybe hard questions to answer. So certainly the garbage disposal is a huge issue, right? That's a big part of it. What we might not be thinking about so much in terms of waste or waste management in our food system is just how much food is wasted, period. I'm not talking about, things that are in packages or things that we're trying to dispose of, but, just how much waste and inefficiency there is in the entire system. So, for instance, getting the food from the farm to our fork eats up about 10% of the total U.S. energy budget, uses 50% of U.S. land, and 80% of all the fresh water consumed in the United States. Those are fairly staggering numbers. 50% of our land, 80% of our water going to agriculture. We need to feed people. But wasted food is also the single largest component of U.S. municipal solid waste, so in the dump, where it accounts for a big portion of our U.S. Methane production, so our greenhouse gas productions. So if we reduced food losses by just 15%, it's not a lot, be enough food to feed more than 25 million Americans every year, when 1 in 6 are going hungry or lack, they call it food insecurity these days, a term I think it's kind of a euphemism and hides what the reality is. But each year, about 40% of all food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Now, we've just, over the last weeks, examined our own food budgets and taken a look at what we've spent on there. So, on average, we can figure that out of what we've spent, 40% of that money we could have saved had we not wasted our food. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of waste. Please don't get up in arms about that. I'm just saying that this is our average. We throw out the equivalent of $165 billion each year. Average American wastes about 10 times as much food as somebody in Southeast Asia does, and that's up 50% from what we used to do in the 1970s. That's more than 20 pounds of food per person per month. So at heart, the couple basic realities need to be acknowledged. First is that food represents a small portion of many of our budgets, so making the financial cost of wasting food too low to outweigh the convenience of it. Second, plain economic truth. The more consumers waste, the more those in the food industry are able to sell. This is throughout the supply chain, where the waste downstream translates to higher sales for anyone upstream. So again, that's that problem of the fixed stomach. We can only eat so much, and companies, corporations particularly, are dedicated to growth. They need to sell more and more every quarter, every year. How are they going to do that without waste? Be a problem. If we're talking about food consumed versus food lost, this is for US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, compiled by the Food and Agriculture Organization in 2012. The highest amount of loss is in fruits and vegetables. So over 52% of vegetables, fruits and vegetables purchased are wasted. 50% of seafood, 38% of grain products, meat 22%, milk 20%. So a lot lower percentages on the high ticket items like meat. And where do the losses occur? So during production, about 20% in terms of fruits and vegetables are lost, as opposed to grain products about 2%, seafood about 11%, meat and milk like 3 and 5% or 3 and 3%. Then post-harvest handling and storage, not a lot lost there. Fruits and vegetables maybe up to 5%. Most things are in the 2-3% range. Processing and packaging losses in grain, it's about 10%. Seafood maybe 5%. Fruits and vegetables about 1%. Meat somewhere around 4%. Distribution and retail losses, so on the way to the supermarket or things that the stores can't sell. Again, fruits and vegetables in the highest category, about 12%. Seafood close to 10%. Meat maybe 4%. Grain and milk pretty low at that point. By far, though, the biggest loss is at the consumer stage, where almost 30% of fruits and vegetables are tossed out. Seafood, about 35%. Grain products, maybe 20, almost 30%. Meat, 12%. And milk, 17%. So we as consumers are the ones responsible for most of our food waste. But that doesn't excuse the waste at other steps of the process. So, like one large cucumber farmer estimated that fewer than half the vegetables that he grows actually leave the farm, and that 75% of the cucumbers that get culled or pulled before sale are edible. Large tomato packing house reported that in mid-season it can fill a dump truck with 22,000 pounds of discarded tomatoes every 40 minutes. That's 11 tons of tomatoes every 40 minutes. Packers of citrus, stone fruit, grapes estimate that 20 to 50% of the produce that he handles is unmarketable but perfectly edible. So one industry consultant estimates that up to 1 in 7 truckloads of perishables delivered to supermarkets is thrown away. It's a lot. In 2008, the food service sector lost 86 billion pounds of food, or that's almost 20%, 19% of the total U.S. retail food supply. It's a whole lot. And again, then from 1982 to 2002, the average pizza slice grew 70% in calories. Average chicken Caesar doubled, and the average size of chocolate chip cookie quadrupled. So how much food do we throw away at home? Well, we throw away approximately 25% of the food we buy. and again, leads to those kind of downstream problems. So a report from the UK estimates that if food scraps were removed from the landfills in Britain, level of greenhouse gas abatement would be equivalent to removing 1/5 or 20% of all the cars in the country from the road. Okay, so that's just in the scraps thrown away. Every year, American food waste represents the energy equivalent of 350 million barrels of oil. In 2010, we wasted almost 34 million tons of food. That's enough to fill the Empire State Building 91 times. Meanwhile, over 17 million households in the U.S. were going hungry. 46 million Americans, that's nearly 1 in 7 people, rely on food stamps. So this is clearly a problem that it is in everybody's best interest to solve, to just stop wasting food. So how do we do it? In this week's discussion, we'll do a little exploring about our own food waste and that of other cultures. So I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of research and then present what you find. In the meantime, really start thinking about ways that we can combat waste, both before it gets to our stores or our homes, but really once it's there. What are our strategies for minimizing food waste, food loss, and doing our part to make sure that we can try to end hunger?